left off with mindfulness of feeling, looking for just the sensation of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And this can be kind of slippery to attend to. The underlying sensation is sensation. The sense of pleasant or unpleasant is not intrinsically embedded in the sensation. Sensation of pleasant and unpleasant is not intrinsically connected to the story that we're about to tell ourselves about it, the labeling, and so on. So one way to look into this a little bit more carefully is if we look at sensation that's neutral in some sense, kind of a bit middle of the road. But under one circumstance, we might go, ah. Another circumstance, we go, oh. And I had the experience working with this at the old center, sitting, working with this, and the window next to me was open. And a cool breeze was coming in. But the context was that I was already cold, and it felt unpleasant. And I noticed that if I had been hot, I would have thought, that's about the best thing in the world. So the context and the habits that we have play into that sensation of pleasant and unpleasant. So that's just something to consider in that when we go back to that practice, when we interweave that. So let's again go for refuge.
Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness.
Can begin by turning to the domain of the tactile sense field, just noticing the body. Noticing the movement of the body as it breathes. Noticing the flow of experience that unfolds as the air moves in and out of your nostrils. We draw our attention to the experience in our hands. It's very easy for a mental image of our hands to arise in our mind. Allow that image to arise, one hand, and just note that this is a mental image. It's not entirely disassociated from turning your attention to the sensation of your hand, but it's not intrinsically linked to it. It's a different domain of experience. When we're attending to the experience of the body, subtle and coarse thoughts may arise in relationship to that. Or when we hear things, labels will arise. So for a moment, while attending to the body, sensations, notice the domain of mental activity. Notice the play of the mind. Turning more fully to the domain of mental activity. We can take the opportunity to see the range of things that unfold. You can bring an image to mind. Any image. Note any story that arises. You can note any emotional quality that's associated with the story or the image. Attending to what arises in the domain of the mind can be slippery because we can get caught in our habitual manner, being drawn into the story and losing awareness. Or we can become confused by thinking about the thinking about the thinking. But that part's okay if we just realize this is just mental activity. So for a moment, just watch the play of what arises in the mind. because this can be a bit slippery, it's good to alternate between something more simple, like just attending to the tactile domain or the breath, allow the mind to relax and the attention just to settle into the tactile domain. Mental activity may continue, but just allow the central focus to be, again, the tactile domain of sensation. Turning again to the domain of mental activity, bring to mind mental image, memory, something perhaps like a sunset that was particularly enjoyable. Just noting this image, this recollection, is the play of mental activity, the play of the mind. You might recall whether it was warm or cool or windy or calm. Whether that felt unpleasant or pleasant or neutral at the time. bringing back, making sure that the recollection of the sunset is there vividly in your mind for a moment. Just let that image dissolve. Notice the things that arise and dissolve in the mind. This is a characteristic of the domain of mental activity. Thoughts and memories and images arise for a moment, some time. They change and dissolve. Perhaps watch a very simple thought that you might actively generate arise in the mind and dissolve. Just notice the arising and dissolution of what comes through the experience of the mind. And for a moment, while noticing this arising and dissolving, as the mind moves, turn your attention back to what is aware. It's almost like if you were looking out, look back in at the aware aspect, the knowing aspect of the mind. Rest with the aware aspect. take a moment to release the effort. To move. And bring the light attention to the movement, the stretching. Now we'll turn our attention to the aspect of the four foundations, labeled mindfulness of phenomena. It's almost unfortunate to give it a label before doing it, since I think the label might make it sound too complicated or fancy. We've had the opportunity to let the attention roam through the domains of the senses, become familiar a little bit with the domain of feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and also touched on the domain of mental activity. In our ordinary life, the attention floats among these. Okay, you could say it actually sort of moves, kind of like a butterfly, quickly lighting on one thing after another. So we can take a moment to actually just watch, become familiar with how it is that the mind moves, that the attention moves. And since this is, in a certain sense, so close to our ordinary pattern where we're doing this, but we're lost in it, it's very easy to become lost in it and lose awareness. So it is very good to do it briefly, so we can alternate between attending just to some aspect of the domain of physical sensation and attending to the movement of the mind as it moves through all the aspects of experience. Since when we look at things, we may have some impulse to want to pin them down. This can be a bit of a challenge in mindfulness of phenomena, because we want to be able to give a report to ourselves of, oh, that was hearing, that was seeing, that was a thought, that was a this, that was a this, in order to confirm for ourselves that we're actually aware of what's transpiring. And if we actually have deeply relaxed mind, that labeling just becomes part of the flow. But it can become a frustrating element as well. So it can be helpful to do this in sessions of 30 seconds to a minute. And then turn back to mindfulness of the body. It's a place to relax and just let the attention settle and relax into some aspect of sensation. So beginning, turning our attention just to mindfulness of sensation with some energy and vividness. Bring the attention just to the sensation of the air flowing in and out of the nostrils. Here we can emphasize vividness of attention on the experience. And let the attention open. Relax and be aware of how the awareness moves through all the domains of experience. Again, rediscover the breath. Bring vivid attention to the moment-to-moment flow, the experience of the breath at the nostrils. Then release the focus and just observe. Return with vividness to the experience of the breath. Release the focus and observe. vivid attention on the flow of experience of the breath. And release. And this time turn the attention back into the awareness. And relax.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
And again, we'll take a brief break in silence. You can use the opportunity to allow the attention to observe all the things that arise in your experience. And occasionally turn the attention back to awareness itself.